Hi, everybody, and welcome to our UX Career Masterclass, where to find the jobs and how to land one. In a couple moments, we're going to go through a few little bits of housekeeping before we start the presentation and discussion. So just to begin, we're going to cover a little bit about how the chat and questions actually work on this forum. So the chat tab is there for you to actually be able to discuss things amongst yourselves throughout the session. And then at the end, we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A where you're going to be able to ask myself and the other participants in the panel a little bit about the career journeys, etc. Basically, please use the questions tab for that. And if you do have a similar question to one that's already been asked, can I ask you to please upvote the questions, as we'll be prioritizing them at the end of the session. Okay, so jumping straight in, I just want to tell you a little bit about the UX Design Institute. So we're the global leader in UX education and certification. We offer credit-rated courses and industry-approved courses in UX design, UI design, product design, content design, user research, and software and coding fundamentals. At the moment, we're actually running a Black Friday sale until 29th of November, where there are some nice discounts for everyone. So please have a look at our website and learn a little bit more about what's on offer. Okay, so just to start, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to myself. I'm Owen. I'm the Senior Career Advisor here at UX Design Institute. And I'm joined today by some of our former students, Louise Byrne, who's the product design team lead at Vodafone, and Luke Bracken, a UX designer at IBM. So just in a moment, I'm going to get them to introduce themselves to you and tell them a little bit about their career path so far. And then we'll get straight into the live discussion. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to cover today. Right now, we're going to be covering some of the insights into the emerging opportunities that you might not have considered before. We're going to discuss a little bit about how key qualifications and portfolios help with hiring managers, help with them prioritize and selecting candidates, and how you can enhance your job readiness, leverage transferable skills, and expand your network. And as we've the main point of discussion today, we're going to hear firsthand from UX Design Institute alumni about their career journeys and their job search strategies. Okay, so let's jump straight into it. So Louise, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Louise, product design team lead with Vodafone, as you saw on the intro slide. So I've been with Vodafone now 3.5 years, coming up to 3.5 years. And my role at the moment is team lead. So I support the head of design, building out the design strategy, the goals for the team that we want to achieve for the year, mentoring and coaching junior designers, helping with the hiring process, organising upskilling and engagement opportunities for the team. And as well as that, I do kind of get my hands dirty as well with design work and working on design projects and things like that. And I'm a former student or alumni, I think is what you call me as well. So I did the professional diploma in UX design back in 2019. So about four or 5 years ago. And that diploma actually helped me make a career change from digital marketing into UX. So yeah, that's my brief high-level story.
That's great. Thanks very much for introducing yourself. And I just want to also add a little congratulations. So Louise's team just won Best In-House Design Team at the Institute of Designers in Ireland at their annual awards. So congratulations on that. And so next I would like, Luke, can you introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about your journey here?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. So my name is Luke Bracken, and I'm a UX designer at IBM. So I'm very new to it. I've only been there since April, so about maybe 8 months or so now. And I'm also a very recent graduate or alumni as well of the UX Design Institute. I got my professional diploma in February, which really helped me kind of land my next role. It was pretty much straight after. It was about a month after, I think, I did the started interviewing and I had my portfolio ready to go and started the job, pretty soon after as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So I haven't been there that long, pretty junior, but it's a really fun area to work in. I work within the data and AI division of IBM. So we get to work on some really cool stuff. The product I work on is a AI assistant automation builder type of thing. So it's really cool to be kind of right on the cutting edge of some really interesting technology. And yeah, really cool to be here. I've attended loads of these as a student only very recently. So it's really cool to be on the other end.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. So I suppose, just to get started with our discussion, a lot of people will actually have questions about the jobs market. So, for example, both of you have seen it from either end of the spectrum recently. So, for example, Louise, you've been doing a bit of hiring in your role, and then also Luke, you've been, as you mentioned, recently joined IBM. So, I suppose a lot of people have questions about what it's looking like, and we're also seeing a lot of stuff on kind of LinkedIn and other forums where people are actually talking about how difficult it is at the moment. Obviously, things had been a bit chaotic over the last 18 months, but actually are recovering quite substantially now, and a lot of hiring is actually starting back up at similar rates as before. I suppose tell us a little bit about your own experiences there. So who would like to start telling it?
I can go first if you want. I suppose it's just pretty recent for me, right? Looking at the market in the last few years. So I suppose for me as well, joining IBM as well, when that role came up, as I thought, this is a great opportunity, right? I might be starting on my own, very much, as kind of the new person. Absolutely not the case. We're hiring so many designers, which is really refreshing to see, as you can say, because the market maybe hasn't been as strong as it was, for the over the last 2 years right after COVID. But we've been hiring a lot. I wasn't even the UX designer to start on the day that I joined. There was 2 other people to start on the same day. We've had, I'd say, at least 15 people join since then, since April as well. So we've been hiring quite a lot. And I think as you kind of, you can look at it as well, I think it probably is more of a case of the fact that it's kind of reverting back to the mean where there was a lot of hiring in COVID. But ultimately, I suppose I've had 2 roles pretty recently as well. The first one I started, it was just over 2 years ago now too. And that was an entry-level role. So again, that was in a time where maybe there wasn't as many jobs out there, but there still are. Right? I was still able to find them, keeping an eye on LinkedIn. And I used the Slack channels and stuff, and met with your cell phone after, you get, you can see when new jobs are posted, that you can share them, and kind of keeping on top of it like that. But I think that there definitely are, as I said, we're hiring a lot right now from my perspective, and it's my second role in, matter of 2 years. So, I mean, it may be not always as positive as it was, but I think the demand is definitely still out there. So yeah.
And Louise, there's plenty of market data that we've been seeing that's actually showing that there's growing demand for UX skills in different roles. What's your experience been in your current role in Vodafone at the moment? Are you seeing similar in the market there?
So we've recently just hired a new designer to our team. Now our team is, well, I say it's quite lean, but when I was talking to you, Owen, earlier, you were like, no, that's quite a big team. So we've a team of 12 designers. So while we have just hired another one, converse to what Luke was saying, we haven't been hiring loads. But we are definitely, all the designers are flat out, and we've never been as busy as we have. So we are really in demand within our business at the moment. And I think you might share the report, or, there's been research in terms of UX is now one of those top skills that employers are looking for, or that's going to be on the rise over the coming years. And then as well as that, other industries. So typically when people think of UX, they're like digital tech. But there's actually a lot of other emerging industries where UX and design thinking skills are actually really needed, in terms of the financial industry, the medical industry, and then, especially with the whole new European Accessibility Act, which is coming into play next year, June 2025. So that's really gonna, I'd say that will bring a lot of opportunities as well, not just in tech, within a lot of other industries, to make sure people's new products and services and apps and websites are accessible to everyone. And there's going to be a lot of work needed to do that. So yeah, like, I'd say it's positive, and that kind of corresponds with the report and the research that you've done yourselves.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for giving us a little bit of insight there. So, like, I suppose I just kind of want to delve a little bit into kind of what does a role in UX mean? Like, what does it look like to work in a design department or team for either of you?
Yeah, I'll go first. I'll nominate myself. Yeah, so we were talking about this before the call as well. Like, there's loads of different titles when we think of UX. So for example, my role's a product, or my first role was product designer. And some people mightn't, what's the difference? And in terms of my role, I suppose we do a lot of the UX responsibilities, we do the research, but with that added layer of meeting business needs as well. So we're trying to balance those user needs, but also with those business needs. And it's kind of more getting into the strategy, competitor analysis, helping the business to also achieve their goals. And then, looking at what the competitors are doing as well. So that's, I suppose, our roles predominantly is product design. So we kind of do everything. And as mentioned, we're a pretty lean team, and on our team we've 12 designers, but we're not all product designers. We have some content designers or UX writers as well, so we'll collaborate with them in the different projects when needed. We have some grads, and then we also have some graphic or visual designers as well. And the way we work in Vodafone is we're aligned to different products. So the different products that we sell, and we've squads, and we work in agile to achieve those goals as well. And that's the way we're set up. But it can look very different in terms of industries or even companies. So it'll be interesting to Luke to hear, what does that look like in IBM?
Yeah, it is actually really interesting, because I have some very contrasting experience, I think, as well, from my two roles. So this is my second role in UX. Basically, my first one was with a company called Alumni, or US bank. So it was in fintech, the fintech industry, which kind of leads back to what you were just saying about, other industries that are hiring. But that was very different. That was, I suppose, it's like way more lean, as in there isn't even a traditional, or at least there wasn't a traditional like UX team, a UX department. I was one of very few, like maybe 3-4 UX people or designers. Again, there are so many names for what you could be in UX that we were all called something different. But for me, I was a UX/UI designer, and I was from a graduate program too. So I was very entry level, but there wasn't really a team. It wasn't very formalized, right? Like, so again, we kind of went into a specific team, a specific product. I briefly worked in innovation there. I briefly worked in some more traditional kind of customer facing products then as well. But that kind of way, where it's just a less the kind of UX mature company, I'd say. Like, I think they were starting to invest in it. Big part of my job was kind of going around and, introducing the concepts of UX to people, but there wasn't really, researchers, there wasn't really content, there wasn't really, visual designers. It was just, you were a designer. So you kind of had to do everything in a way, which I kind of found towards the end, which can be a little daunting, I suppose, as someone who was, a graduate. It's an entry level role, right? But I mean, on the other hand, it's so much experience. I got so much experience in very little time there, because I had to conduct the research, I had to do the copy, any of the content, I had to do the UX, like, all that process. But then that's the UI at the end, that's also my responsibility, right? So it's just a less mature kind of UX team. So you're kind of more of a generalist, I suppose, where you're kind of doing a little bit of everything, which is great experience. But then when I came into IBM, it's completely different. It's a whole different world, because IBM, I'd say, is one of the most like mature in terms of its design departments. Like, I think under the software like bracket, design is equal, to PM or development or sales, marketing. It's just one of the pillars that we have. So it's very mature. We have a load of content designers, researchers, UX designers, visual designers. So you're much more specialized, I suppose. As a UX designer, then it literally is my job is to map the user experience, which is very different for me. I'm still trying to learn doing that, right? And trying not to focus too much on, say, the UI. Because we have a visual designer for that who will actually pick that up in the end. So I think it's just funny. It's just to see the difference, right? Going from a company who's, less mature and into a company that has, much more kind of standard practices in place around UX. Not saying that one is better than the other, really. Again, there was some amazing experience by kind of doing it all. But they're different roles, I think. And you'll kind of see that in different companies with depending on how mature they are, how big their teams are, that kind of thing.
Brilliant. So obviously you've both kind of touched on it a little bit already, but like kind of what are some of the surprising non-traditional areas that you're starting to see UX actually creep into in terms of design discipline?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose fintech is a great example, right, of where I was at a company, not even like a bank, right? It's not like, it wasn't like a very customer facing product. Vodafone do payments, basically. They're a payments processor. So I remember when I seen that, I was like, what would you be doing? I suppose you think of UX, you think, very much you're working on an app like a Spotify or Airbnb, something like that. So it's kind of interesting. When that role came up, I was like, what would I be actually working on? But I think those kind of companies now, they're almost in a way playing catch up, I think, because you got a lot of people kind of come in, like a lot of different companies kind of come in, think of like, again, in the fintech center, like Revolut and Monzo in the UK, these kind of competitor banks kind of come in and they're kind of built from scratch using like UX, right? Using research, using design. So I think a lot of these companies are now kind of in a way playing catch up, which makes it sound kind of bad, but they kind of are, right? They just haven't had maybe a design team. So even though that was not in tech, it was definitely a financial company, being in tech, in the tech side, in software there, you were definitely in the minority, right? Because it is mostly a financial company. But companies like that are now also hiring because, I mean, if you think about it, every company now has a digital experience for someone, right? Whether it's, B2B or B2C. And where there's digital experience, there's an experienced designer, a UX person that can kind of come in there too. So I think it's interesting. I think it definitely is expanding to almost everything, really, right?
Brilliant. So obviously, like a lot of kind of your journeys to this point, like you both mentioned kind of a little bit about sort of education and certification being a factor with regards to you landing your roles. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about that? So, for example, like how important was UX certification or a solid foundation in UX education for you?
Yeah, I can go first with that one. So for me, it was extremely important. As mentioned, I'm coming from a different industry, kind of making a career change. So in order for people way back when to look at me and actually give me a chance, I needed some sort of basis or foundation in UX. So yeah, it was really, really important for me. And I suppose that's why I chose you. Was like kind of, you had good credentials, it was recommended, and just the format of the learning and the online and the video, all that kind of thing really suited how I learn. And yeah, that's why I decided to do it with you guys.
So yeah, I suppose the same question. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, very similar. I mean, in a way, yeah, I suppose much more. I graduated pretty recently, right? And I actually had some experience in UX. That's where I learned what UX was. Even I don't think I even knew what that was until I went to college, right, to university. So I studied in Maynooth University and did media technology, which was basically half computer science, half media studies. And that's where I was introduced to human-computer interaction was the first module. And I was like, that's it. That's the one. That's what I'm going to do. But I think coming out of that course, because like it wasn't a UX course, right? I don't even think that even exists still. I don't think there is an undergraduate UX degree that you can do in Ireland, at least. Not yet anyway. There was a lot of masters, but so I had a lot of like knowledge kind of, about what UX is and human computer interaction. but I had no way of like applying it, right? I think that was the best way. It was kind of foundational knowledge that I came out with. And that course was great because I ended up getting a job in digital marketing and then in web development because it was so broad. But because it was so broad, I had, you know, a little bit less maybe, you know, knowledge and experience in UX itself. So for me, I did a lot of like short courses or different certificates that you can do, because again, there's so many, like there is for anything, right? When you're Googling it. But I've heard of the UX Design Institute before. It was well recommended by a lot of people. And for me, it was, I mean, it's two things, which is one, it was the university accreditation, I think, right? Like that makes it stand out because there's a lot of courses that, you know, they give you a credential, but this one's backed right by a university, so that'll stand out to hiring managers. And also for me, it was just comprehensive is the way I describe it. So like start to finish, it's like everything in the one place and everything that kind of follows on from each other. So instead of taking, you know, a module on this and then come back, take a module on this, it was right. It's a linear flow. You have access to it for like a year, and then you're building your portfolio project throughout it. So for me, it was a no-brainer basically to do it like that. And I think not only for the accreditation, which I think has helped, but for me as someone so junior, I think that knowledge, I think I really, really needed to be able to kind of take the next step into, you know, UX design as well.
And Luke, you just touched on something that I really kind of wanted to dig into, actually. Like, for example, like when you were actually applying for the role, like how important was your portfolio in that process? So we do put a lot of work into kind of making sure everyone is kind of prepared and can tell a bit of a UX story, but like how useful was that for you?
Yeah, really, really important. I mean, I think, again, before I even had gotten into UX and I was working as a developer, I was meeting with some other, you know, UX designers in my first company. And the first thing that they said to me was like, do you have a portfolio? I was like, no. And they're like, well, there you go. There's step one, right? Because it's crucial basically now. It's not, I don't think it is like a nice to have anymore. I've applied for so many roles. Right? Trust me, when I was trying to break into UX for the first time for my first role, and I'd say the vast majority of them, when you're applying, they will ask for a link to your portfolio and it will be a required field. So there's no getting around it. It's really, really important. And then specifically, I suppose, for IBM, it was really important because not only they're obviously going to look at that, right? So they'll look at your CV, they'll look at your portfolio. But for me, in the interview that I did, it was all around the portfolio, basically. So they were kind of like looking through it, asking me questions about, you know, different parts, like why we made that decision, or, you know, tell me more about this bit, that kind of thing. So the whole hiring process was basically based on my portfolio. So it was really, really important. And I mean, it helped that it was so fresh for me, I think, as well, right? Because I did include the project from the professional diploma in UX design. I had that was one of my main two. I only had two main ones. And yeah, even though, right, I think was maybe like a little bit apprehensive because it's not real. I think that kind of comes up, right? Like it's not like a real project, but it's to show that you can do it, that you have experience doing it, and then being able to speak to it in the interview as well. Not just having everything there, but actually being able to speak about it. So yeah, back to your question, really important, crucial.
And Louise, like same thing from the other side. Obviously, you've been in kind of a senior role for a while now as kind of a design lead in product design. So I'm sure you see a lot of portfolios coming in from candidates all the time. So like what's I suppose crucial about that? Like what are you kind of looking for essentially?
Yeah, so Luke's dead right. Like it's probably the most important thing. Obviously your CV is important. Keep that really lean, one page, scannable. But what we really focus on is the portfolio, and that's what's going to decide if you get through to an interview or not. It's your portfolio. Luke also mentioned that he only had 2 projects at the time. I think that's perfect. Only have your two to 3 best pieces of work that you're really proud of in there. It's definitely quality over quantity. And then in terms of your portfolio, what we look, and again, as Owen, when we had a conversation, like it's completely subjective, like different people look for different things. So also do bear that in mind. But from my perspective, what we really focus on in product design is the process. So when we look at your portfolio, we really want to see your process. And there's that 80-20 rule. So 80% your process and then 20% on the actual outcome or solution or design. Too many times we see beautiful, gorgeous, beautiful portfolios, but there's no mention of the user. They've completely forgotten about the user. There's no validation, user testing, or even like how you got to there. How did you make that decision? And we can spot that from the get-go. And if we don't see that, like, sorry, but yeah, you're not getting through to the next round. We really want to see your process. And actually a top tip for the portfolio as well, which I kind of only recently, well, not recently, but I made sure I got myself into the habit of doing over the past year or two, is when I'm working on projects, is to make a note in my to-do list to actually take photos or get someone to take a photo of me doing user testing or, running workshops, so I can include those in my portfolio as well. Something we see is people using stock images in their photos, which we can spot from a mile off, which it's not a red flag, but it raises a flag like, oh, have they actually done this? Where if we see that you're in the photo, it just adds a bit more credibility and authenticity to your portfolio as well. So that's a top tip. I definitely would get people into the habit of taking photos along your process so you can showcase that in your portfolio and in the interview process.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So I suppose kind of moving on to our next topic of discussion, basically, I just kind of, both of you are coming in from perspectives that are quite different. Like Louise, you're a career switcher. You started out in marketing. So for example, like we have done a lot of research into this, and according to what we're seeing in the market is about 76% of UX designers started out in some other career. So basically what I want to kind of delve into is like, how did some of those skills that you acquired through your previous experience actually impact your journey into UX? Like, did it lead you to the opportunity to jump into UX? Or like, for example, do you find a lot of the skill set that you were using before were useful?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of my transferable skills were transferable, so it made it easy to make that career change or jump into UX. Like for example, so I was doing digital marketing. I was an online merchandiser, and in my role, I had to coordinate with. So I was a digital marketer for Europe, so I had to coordinate with 10 different countries. Say if we wanted to run a promotion, or a sale online, and definitely those like collaboration skills, aligning with different stakeholders, they're key skills that you need in product design to bring people to your way of thinking, bring them along the process, help them to empathize with the user. And yeah, just collaboration is just super important in terms of running workshops, and just coming up with the best solutions for users. So yeah, definitely all the skills I had acquired up to that point, when I kind of had a freak out and I was like, no, I don't want to do this, I want to do that, they definitely helped me transition. And I think I would encourage people, if UX is what they want to do, like, don't let that stop you just because you mightn't have a lot of experience or whatever, because diversity is great when you're solving problems, and you come up with the best solutions when you have the most diverse minds together in a room. So yeah, that's actually like a benefit to you, and it shouldn't hold you back.
And that's another thing actually as well. Like we have seen people kind of gain a lot of success. They might not feel that they're coming from a relevant field, and we're seeing that, when they get into the job, they actually find out actually a lot of what they've actually learned from other areas can be quite useful. So like, for example, you mentioned different industries that are actually employing people in UX related roles at the moment. And obviously some of those are non-traditional industries. So therefore, what we're seeing a lot of is people with experience in those industries becoming UX designers and getting a foothold within a lot of companies that, for example, they might be coming from a background in nursing and end up in a med tech company, for example. So often that that prior experience and knowledge of that industry can actually be a distinct advantage when moving to that space as well. So, Luke, you're quite a little bit different. You're coming from a kind of a student experience, but you did mention that a lot of the course that you studied at university did cover a lot of different areas. Did you find a lot of the skill set that you learned there very beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think I remember even looking back on it now, like I studied in the media side of it, which you kind of had to do. I got to pick a lot of my modules, right? But I also had to do some. And I remember looking back now, they were all about like affordances and semantics. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. That's what we also learn when you take up UX. So there is, I mean, this was a kind of an interesting one too. Technically, I'm also from digital marketing, right? But I was there for maybe 7 months, I think. So it's a bit different. I started on a graduate program out of college. And so I started in digital marketing, moved to web development, basically. I was only there for about a year, I'd say total. So it's not like I had a lot of experience to switch from. I knew I wanted to do UX, but I remember as I was doing them, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, but it's not a UX. But through both of those, I've had so many skills that I could use. And some of them are not even, I'd say, specific to UX. Like I'd say even just being able to work, in different teams, working remotely, I think is a big thing, because every job I've had has been, very global, working with people in different times and stuff. And like, that's a skill in itself, right? But then even, I suppose, as I was working as a developer, there's so many, that's the obvious one, I suppose, probably the most obvious, right? Is as a developer, having that kind of background. And like, I was not a great developer by any means. There's a reason why I didn't take that up in college. But having the background, I think, like in software development, in programming, has helped a lot, because it helps you speak to developers. That you do that, right? As a designer, you're doing that quite often. Is you're speaking to different developers. But for me as well, after like I had applied to IBM, I remember speaking to one of the guys who hired me, and the fact that I was a developer and had that background not only helps with that, talking to developers, but at IBM we work on some complicated software. Like it's not B2C, and some of it's very hard to get your head around. But I think having that background, like some of it's very technical, like we're working on some very technical, very logical stuff. And I'm so glad of having that background now as well. And I think I definitely was of the mindset of maybe trying to like hide it a little bit, not completely hide it, but right. I think people are like, oh, I want to be a designer, so I'm a designer. But I think actually show your back, like, talk about your background. Like there's so many transferable skills. My favorite thing to do when I meet a designer is ask them, how did they get into design? Because there's like a 90% chance that they started somewhere else and they moved into design. And it's really interesting. There's so many different areas with transferable skills. I see it all the time.
Okay, and I suppose both of you have valuable insights here. Like, what sort of advice would you give to people actually switching careers at this point? Like, what would you say to them if they're uncertain about like whether they'd actually be a good fit for the UX industry?
Yeah, well, as I said previously, like, don't let that hold you back, as both Luke and I have said. Like diverse skills, prior knowledge of an industry, empathy of how different people work is going to basically make you stand out. So yeah, don't let it hold you back. And as I think the report as well, I think it's over 70% have made majority of people have made a career change into UX. So you're not alone. You're in the majority, and if it's something you really want to do, absolutely go for it, because I'm so happy I did it, because I get to wake up and do something I love. I rarely get the Sunday night blues or whatever, okay, well, like that's a bit dramatic. Obviously there's challenges and stuff like that, but I genuinely do love my job. It fulfills me, and I'm really passionate about that. So yeah, go for it.
And so I suppose same to you, Luke, like, do you have any advice? Obviously it's a lot more recent for you, so fresh in your mind.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I suppose it's a testament to it that, again, I remember when I was working as a developer, I was literally like, oh, this is not what I want to do. It's, I want to be a UX designer. But then again, it was such a benefit to me, but I don't think I appreciated it enough at the time. But I think once you get into the industry, and as I said, like, it literally is my favorite thing to ask is, how did people get into design? Because UX is a very new, like in the grand scheme of things, I think it's a very new like industry, a very new profession. Like it's not, but it is at the same time. So like a lot of people have transitioned. As I said, like there isn't really a lot of like, say, undergraduate, like straight out of school into university. There isn't really like UX degrees yet. Maybe it's someday, maybe someday there will be, right? But a lot of people have switched. So I think you need to embrace it more than anything, right? Embrace that you have skills. Like the main skill really is problem solving too, right? And that's any job is going to have some degree of problem solving. But people come from so many different backgrounds. I see it all the time in IBM as well. Some completely unrelated, non-tech, non-anything, but they make really good designers, really good researchers, because as Louise was saying, like empathy or problem solving, right? They're very transferable. So yeah.
Okay, so I suppose like both of you, I think you were both working at the same time as doing the course as well. So obviously that's for a lot of people, it can be quite daunting to kind of take on a diploma program when you're actually in the middle of work. So like, how did you kind of manage to balance everything, like your existing day job, like learning new skills, etc. You know?
Yeah, well, for me, I have to say it was pretty manageable. I actually did my master's while working as well. Now that nearly killed me. Like, not gonna lie, that was extremely difficult. So kind of after being traumatized and getting through that, like anything was a walk in the park. So the professional diploma for me was I'm not going to say easy, because obviously, yeah, you have to juggle both, but it is manageable. I will say that it's really manageable. From what I remember, and like, as I said, this is a good few years ago now, but it was like all on your own time. So you're in charge of what modules you do and how you progress, and you can speed through the modules in the project, or you can go slower, and you have the time to do that. And the way I kind of managed it was not every evening, because I learned from my master's, but maybe 1 or 2 evenings a week, I would mark it in my calendar, like, okay, after work, these nights I'm going to do my UX work, and maybe spend 2 or 3 hours doing that, but also making sure to have that work-life balance, going out for walks, doing my exercise, minding my mental health, all that kind of thing, as well. So that's kind of how I managed it. I don't know, Luke, you're fresher. See, I kind of forget all this now.
Hey, very similar, I suppose. I haven't done a master's, but I suppose I was in the job hunt for my first role while in college and doing final exams. So it's kind of similar in I could survive that, I could survive anything. So that was really tough, like trying to, balance studying and doing my final year exams and projects and applying to roles, grad programs. I'm sure people can relate if you're applying for like entry level grad positions there. They can be really tough to find. There's lots of interviews, stages, and lots of assessments and stuff. And I had to balance that with college. So I suppose you kind of learn how to deal with it. But for me as well, doing the professional diploma, I was already working as a UX UI designer as well at my last company. But I think, as you mentioned, Louise, it was the fact that you could do it in your own time, I think, was huge for me. Because I mean, not that I maybe should admit it, but it was definitely probably a month where I might not have even looked at it, but then there'd be the next month where I really looked at it. And it's just how I learn. I think it works better that way. I could really kind of, do it in my own time. And also I took my time. You get a year access to it. I took that year. I made it my goal at the start to take the whole time that I have, take it slowly instead of just trying to rush through them, which I think we've all done with some online courses before, right? It's just kind of rush through them a little bit. I made sure to take my time and took loads of notes, and we provide PDF notes as you go. I made sure to keep them, take them every module. I would take them so that I could go back and look at them. And I even rewatched them a few times as well. So I think it's the fact you could do it in your own time definitely helped, it kind of balance it. It also helped as well at my last role that we had some, I think it was 2 hours on a Friday or something like that to kind of work on personal development and any kind of courses and stuff. So, I take that time, and again, take some evenings and stuff. I find the lectures very easy to watch, but obviously you have to manage the projects, I think, were the big ones for me, and managing your time for that, at the weekends and stuff. But I mean, it's definitely doable at your own pace. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I suppose you mentioned a little bit about the complexity of kind of the interview process. Like, what was your actual approach to preparing for the interviews as well? Do you have any tips for people, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot, I think, is the first thing. And that really helps, is having experience. And again, this could apply to anything, not just UX, but having experience doing interviews is really, really important. You just get more comfortable with the kind of questions that they ask. You get more comfortable being on camera, kind of like this, right? This a few years ago probably would have been really scary, but I think you kind of get more used to it as you do, kind of more. And I think taking interviews as well, like, you're not going to get every job you apply for. I think it's a big thing. It's very easy to be, get your heart like really set on a job. I've done it many times before, especially when I was first trying to break into UX. An example is I can go onto my portal right now at IBM and see that I've applied 3 times before I got accepted. And one of them was a UX designer graduate, which is obviously like an entry-level role. And I had my heart set on that. And I didn't end up getting it. But again, it's experience. It's experience interviewing, being kind of comfortable, and I think you just got to take it as a chance to keep refining. I think tailoring like your CV to each role is really important, to the skills that they have, not just doing one for everything, because it's not going to match up perfectly. And then constantly, like, the portfolio, I think keeping that up to date and learning from it. I personally use Wix for my portfolio, which is not very common. I don't think I haven't seen many people use it, but the benefit that I find of that is, one, really easy to use. I can just drag and drop stuff really, really easy. But also there's less analytics and stuff on it. So I'm kind of reverse engineering it, but I treated like the hiring managers as like my users, which they are. So I'm giving them a link to my website, and I can track their journey. I can see how long they spent on each page, how they got there, what they were looking at, where they came from, all that, if they're sharing it around. And I think from that, you can kind of tell, like, okay, I need to get to the point more, people are there's too much information here. I have too many projects, right? So it's kind of like constantly like refining it. I think taking each interview or each portfolio review, right, as kind of learning to refine for the next one.
Perfect. Thanks very much. I mean, just as I suppose, like, do a lot of people feel a little bit stuck? So I'm just hoping, like, do either of you have any sort of words of encouragement for people who are kind of when they're kind of up against it, trying to find that job, getting a few rejections? What would be your advice to them to kind of keep going?
Well, as Luke said there, like, it is hard. You're not going to get every job you go for. We've all applied for loads of jobs, and rejection is part of the process that we just need to become okay with, and use it as a learning experience to iterate yourself and improve for next time. And often people will equate, if I apply for more jobs, that will increase my chances of getting through. And it actually doesn't. So I'd recommend, don't give up, obviously, don't give up. But be very strategic with what you apply for, and make sure, it's something you want to go for. It's part of your development plan, or where you see your career going. And then make sure you obviously tailor your CV and portfolio to reflect those competencies. And that takes a bit of work to do. So that's why you can't be just like, applying for every single role. Like, you actually have to really think about your CV, your cover letter, and your portfolio for each individual role, and make sure it's tailored. So yeah, do take that time to do that. But yeah, don't become discouraged. Rejection is part of it. And, you will, if you persist, you will get there. Definitely networking as well. So reaching out to people already in the industry on LinkedIn, like, majority of people are really nice and will take the time to reply back to you and maybe even set up a quick call and you can ask them some questions and even get them to critique your portfolio, or, you know, get them to do a user test of your portfolio and all that kind of thing, and just building up that network of who you know. And then when an opportunity does come up, maybe in their organization, they might think of you and be like, oh yeah, I remember that really proactive person. Yeah, I'm gonna reach out to them and give them a chance, kind of a thing. So yeah, networking is really important as well.
Perfect. So I think we've got some questions coming in from the audience now, quite a few now at this point. So I suppose we'll jump into them and just kind of see what people are actually saying. So just bear with me one moment. So our moderator should be able to actually provide some, sorry, it just had a little bit of an issue there. So our moderator should be able to actually give us some insight into some of the questions. Let's see. Got a few upvotes here, so we'll start with those. So we've got one question here. Did anyone take a drop in salary? Look, when you changed career paths, did anyone take a drop in salary? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah. I suppose interesting for me because I started as a graduate anyway, right? So I've kind of moved very, what I would say, like linearly, I guess, right? In terms of like, I'm not a senior or anything like that. I started as a graduate, went from a graduate program to a graduate program into an entry level, right? So, and it kind of seems, I suppose, like it might be, you know, changing jobs is tough, right? You want to make sure it's right. And I've changed definitely too many times. I only graduated 3 years ago. It's definitely changing too many times. But I suppose it's, you know, even if it is linear, like none of them have been promotions, right? They have all been a very similar level. But for me, it got me closer to where I wanted to be. So moving into the UX UI as a graduate, right? I didn't have to take a salary cut, but I definitely wasn't getting paid, you know, amazing salary or anything. But it got me closer. It got me that experience, right? And then I suppose you can, from there, once you kind of get your foot in the door, then you can kind of, you know, get your experience, and you're a bit more comfortable, I think, too, right? I've been there on the other end where you're trying to find a role, right? Like say out of college, and that's very stressful, and you are kind of like applying to everything, which, you know, as Louise said, you probably shouldn't be doing, right? But then you kind of have, you know, very, you know, grateful, I suppose, that you can have a job that you're currently in while looking for another one. That's like is a real privilege, I think, as well.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't taken a decrease myself. However, I'm just thinking back to when I was trying to make the change into UX, into my first role. And I would have been willing to do that just specifically to make that change, just so I could get in the door and get that experience, because I had no experience on my CV as being a UX designer or product designer. So at that time in my life, I was willing to, if it would get me that experience on my CV, and then I could look at obviously progressing after that. But it's down to your needs and where you are, and you just have to weigh that up. Is it worth it? Because, you know, there's a lot going on in the world out there at the moment, so it's definitely a personal decision that you need to think about.
Perfect. So we've got a big question here. So basically, someone wants to know what might be a red flag that people should be aware of when applying for UX roles.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's like roles, I suppose, that don't quite get what UX is, I'd say comes up quite a lot. I can't say I've seen it very often myself, but I feel like they get, you know, posted and shared on LinkedIn when I think it can be a misunderstood like role very much. As I said, like I in my last company, I very much had to go and tell people what UX stood for, right, as a starting point, right? Like that's kind of where we were, and that's fine, right? Like it's no one's job to know, right? They have their own jobs, I suppose. But there are definitely some roles that are like graphic design, I suppose, is a big one. That's such a misconception that people have. I've had that at other companies where, you know, people have asked me to, create a graphic. It's like, I've never opened Photoshop in my life. It's like, that's not my job. I don't know how to do that. So there can be some misconceptions like that. I think that can be pretty common. So that might be one.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And I was going to add to that, like really vague job descriptions as well, potentially. Orange flag, mightn't be a red flag, but yeah, definitely an orange flag.
Perfect. Thanks very much. So I suppose the next question we got here, which is quite popular, it's basically focused on, is LinkedIn the best platform for finding a job in the field?
Yeah, I can start off with that. In my experience, yeah, LinkedIn is where it's at. That's where recruiters reach out to me. And that's where I will also see any jobs coming up that are available. And yeah, it's just, as I said, great for networking and keeping in touch with people. So for me, in my experience, LinkedIn is where it's always at. I don't know, Luke, is that similar to you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think every company now will be posting on LinkedIn, right? Like the job posting will go there, like more than likely. And also like it's pretty good as well. I suppose it's kind of has like an algorithm for jobs, right? That's like based on your activity and your role and stuff. So very easy to find kind of new stuff. You can also set like alerts, which I've definitely done in the past, right? For new jobs that come up, especially at entry level, you can, filter. But yeah, I found every job via LinkedIn. I mean, the job specifically at IBM too, I applied via LinkedIn, but also found on the UX Design Institute's Slack, as I mentioned earlier, from Own. So forever grateful for that too. But again, they were all posted on LinkedIn, and as we said, we're hiring now. They will all go to LinkedIn as well. And yeah, there's definitely the networking aspect to it as well, right? I mean, keeping your own profile, your own brand, I suppose, is really, really important there too. So it's not just your CV and portfolio, but you also have your LinkedIn, your personal brand. I think that can kind of help support it too. So yeah, it's really important.
Perfect. So another question that I think is going to be really relevant to a lot of people. So what types of assessment had you during the recruitment process, aside from the interview, around your portfolio?
For me, that was the main one. It was the portfolio. I didn't actually do like a take-home assignment, which I know is common, but again, that might just be my role, right? I can't say it's the exact same for everyone. It will depend on each role, each team, right? Because they're hiring for like specific teams a lot of the time. It's not just like a general role. So for me, it was portfolio both times. When I got both UX roles, the main thing was around my portfolio in the interview too. But aside from that as well, like the interviews, I think underrated part of the interview is like kind of expressing yourself and your own like passion and your own personality, because I think if you get to the interview, it's more than likely that you've kind of passed the basic requirements of you're qualified for this job, right? Like you have the skills. And then when you get to interview, I think people often overlook it, but like you might be interviewing with someone that you're about to work with. Do you get on well with them? Can they see you fitting in to their team? To show a bit of personality, for a bit of passion. I think that goes a long way too. Like, I don't think I've ever been the most talented designer, right? Like, I know we all have imposter syndrome and stuff, but I think I'm really passionate about it. So being able to show that in interviews, I think that really helps like push it. I think it's often overlooked, but it's just as important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So another big one that's actually coming up is basically a lot of people are actually saying that they're having trouble getting interviews. So the problem of getting to an interview, so far, one of our participants here has basically had kind of the pro forma reply, like given the number of applications, we can't give you personalized feedback. That I know is a common situation for a lot of applicants. You're not going to get a lot of personalized feedback on why you were unsuccessful. So I suppose like with this question, like, do you have any advice so the companies can at least open my portfolio?
Yeah, and that's a fair comment, and I think everyone has probably experienced that. a lot of the time in these recruitment processes, like, it's technology that's deciding who goes through and who doesn't, just because there's so many amount of people that apply for a role. So it's definitely at the start of it, it's making sure that CV and your cover letter is keyword optimized. So you're hitting those competencies, and whatever is in that job spec is like your gospel, and you're trying to insert those keywords into your CV and also into your cover letter. So yeah, that's the technology is something that we have to kind of fight against to get through. It is hard. And that's maybe where adding that personal side of things to it, like that human contact. If you know someone who's working in the company that you're applying for, could they refer you? Because definitely a referral will get you to the top of that pile. So adding that human element to a very tech sort of process might help.
Yeah, with that as well, like, just general networking can definitely be a big asset there. Like, if you're thinking of applying to a company, why not reach out to someone working at that company to get a conversation started and find out, ahead of applying, is it going to be the right place for you as well? I think that can be a really valuable strategy of building your network and actually meeting people in the industry as well. I suppose we've got another really pertinent question here. So basically, a lot of companies actually have NDAs on their work. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of commercially sensitive material. So, like, how do you manage that in your portfolio, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to know the answer to this too. I think, right, as someone very junior, that is a real problem. I think it's going to depend on each company, though, because, like, I've asked people this before. I think some companies take the stance of basically, once it's like released, like public, that you can use it because it's in like public domain, I guess. Then, right, it's been released. It's no longer just internal. But not every company is going to be like that. But also, tell the story, I guess. Like, you don't have to. I know, like Louise, you were saying earlier about like documenting as you go, which is really important too, because then you're saving yourself so much work when you're going back to it. You're like, oh, I can't remember what we did there. But I'd say if you're still able to tell the story, like, I think what we call like the artifacts of the process, which might be like a journey map or a persona, even the prototype wireframes, you might not always be allowed to share them, but you can always share the story, right? You can take out names of companies, and if it's a client, right, you can take them out, but the story will still be there to be told. And I think that's really important too.
I think to add to that as well, like keeping it kind of, I suppose, like keeping it in line with what is publicly available about the project or the company is definitely a good option. But generally, the way I would actually expect things to happen, having kind of worked in recruitment for a long time, is I don't want to see someone present commercially sensitive information in an interview. I don't want to see that because it's a red flag to me about the candidate. So generally, what I've actually recommended to a lot of our graduates in the past is, if you're actually in that situation and you're working with stuff that's under NDA, have a conversation with your line manager and your organization to find out a little bit about what is actually fine to talk about and what isn't. That way you can get sign off on certain elements that you can actually showcase in your portfolio. So, okay, so let me see. We've got quite a few more questions coming in. So just going to select one here, something that's upvoted. So I suppose on the topic of portfolio still, like in a portfolio, how do you balance that you are not explaining that much about the process and showing the final product? I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, Louise.
Yeah.
About like kind of the 80-20 rule. Yep,
80-20. 80% of it is your process, your thinking, how you got there, what you learned, how you iterated, and 20% the final outcome or design if you can show it. And that's 80-20% of a pretty concise, lean page, I'd say, from your own knowledge of users. Users don't like to read too much. Making sure it's very scannable, visual if possible, and treating your portfolio just like a UX project, like making sure that your portfolio is user-friendly and a user is able to get the information they need from it, and they have a good time reading it. So definitely, yeah, treating your portfolio like a project. And I think Luke kind of mentioned as well, like learning from the data that you can get from an analytics plugin, or even user testing your portfolio to see how you can improve it. And just, yeah, I'd say don't go overboard. You need to be concise as well. You're hitting those key things they want to see in your design process, but you're really focusing 80% of your page on your process and then 20% on your outcome.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I suppose, is to leverage your network. I suppose I've been very lucky, but before I applied to IBM, I had multiple sessions with you going over my portfolio, but also people that I worked with at the last company as well. I just reached out to them, sent them my portfolio. They had a look over it, gave me some feedback, and then I could kind of keep iterating on it too. So I was pretty confident, I guess, by the time that I applied, that it was at least not terrible because, other people had looked at it. I had gotten feedback on it as well. So I think it's really important to kind of leverage that network if you have it. Yeah.
Okay, so we are running a little bit short on time, so I'm not going to be able to cover every single question that's come up. So I do apologize to our audience, but I just want to make sure that we're covering at least a couple more of the upvoted questions. So we have a question here, once again, directly relevant to portfolios, but we've got questions around what platforms should be used. Are there favorites? Are there things that are looked down upon in the industry, for example?
I mean, I can take it from my experience, which is, again, I use Wix just because that's what we used one time in college, and I've iterated on it ever since. So I'm not saying that's the best one. And I've seen people use so many different types, right? Looking at examples, I know Dribble is quite popular now. Never use it myself, but people do use PDFs. I've seen Figma prototypes, which is quite creative as well. So I actually think that where you host it doesn't matter too much. It's more about the content, but use what works for you, I suppose. Again, as I said, I use Wix mostly because I know how to use it. So, I think I've tried to use some of the other websites, and then there's a learning curve to it. Now you're adding more work. It's already a lot of work to keep it up to date. So using something that I already knew Wix, and again, I had the analytics to kind of go with it, makes it easier. But I don't think, Louise, you might be able to speak of the other side of it, but for me, it's I've never had a problem with using a web builder.
Yeah, Control C, Control V, everything that you said. Yeah. I've seen all those listed there in portfolios. It's what works for you and how you tell your story the best and what demonstrates your skills. I've seen Figma as well, which is pretty cool because you kill two birds with the one stone. You show your work, but you also show you can use Figma. And yeah, so it's definitely... my portfolio is Wix as well, but I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. It's easier for me to use. But yeah, we do see a lot of people actually having their own websites as well. So yeah, it's up to you.
Okay, so I suppose we'll do one or two more just to make sure that things are covered. So I suppose this one's really relevant. So most junior jobs on LinkedIn ask for at least 3 years of experience. How can I still apply with no experience and only certification and stand out against people with on-job experience?
Yeah, I would start by saying that that's not a junior job, really. I suppose it requires 3 years, and that's a constant problem, right? How do you get experience, right, when everything requires experience? But I would also say those requirements, as they are, usually aren't as set in stone as you think. And I think a lot of people look at it and go, "Oh, I don't have 3 years, or I don't have 2 years experience, so I'm not applying." It doesn't always work like that. I'm pretty sure the job I applied for said that you needed 3+ years. I don't think I even had 3 years, including the graduate program that wasn't in UX. But again, it's not always such a set in stone requirement. And then as well, you can kind of give yourself experience in a way, which is, again, the coursework, that's experience, showing that you can do it. You can also just no one's stopping you just taking a website or an app that exists right now and doing some research on it, and maybe, you know, iterating, come up with some other designs. You can show a process there. And there's also, you can volunteer. I know in Ireland I've seen that before, where you can there's like maybe different websites that people want, you know, help with, and you can go and volunteer, help them. Again, that's technically not experience, but it is experience too. I think you can use that to your advantage as well.
Perfect. I suppose, like, another thing I'd say from my experience as a recruiter, just on that topic, is that, once again, Luke's correct. 3 years of experience is what you'll actually see on a lot of junior job descriptions. In fact, I've even seen it on some intern job descriptions on occasion, and largely that's usually a bit of a mistake, or something that was put in there just as a placeholder. 3 years of experience is definitely not necessarily going to be the be all and end all. Quite often, it's actually what you can showcase from the quality of your work. And I've seen that in places as kind of large as Google. Like, they don't put the emphasis on years of experience. They just put that in as something to, I suppose, essentially control the quality of applications, essentially. So, okay, so I suppose we'll jump off there. I think, yeah. So I'm just looking to see if there's any other majorly upvoted questions. So actually, one interesting question, I suppose, that we can actually round this off. So we've got a question here, and it's a question deliberately for you, Louise, which is, someone has noticed the big pile of books that you've got behind you, and just has some questions like about recommendations.
Oh yeah, good question. What do I have on my shelf? Obviously Don Norman, any of his books. I know you had Don Norman as well, which I joined that masterclass. Lean UX obviously is a good one. That's why I have it out in front. As well as that, it's good to subscribe to like different blogs. So I know the UX Design Institute have your own blog. I know Nielsen Norman Group have a blog, which is really cool because like they do active research in terms of behavior, usability, all that kind of thing. And it's good to just keep up to date with any new findings that they have, or even UX, any of the other UX blogs, like I know Medium as well. And I don't know, is there any other ones, Luke, that you might, or how do you keep up to date?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have, random shout out, I suppose. There's like this newsletter called Built for Mars, which does some of the most interesting UX case studies ever. Like, they're so interesting. I subscribe to that. Keep up to date too. Really interesting. But again, I suppose I do not like reading, but I have read a few UX design books now, and most of them are based on the course. I know, like when I took the course like last year, there was a lot of like recommended material to read, which I didn't do as I was doing the course, but I took note of a lot of them, and I'm now reading them kind of as I go. Like your Don Norman's, as you say, I think it's like a rite of passage, I think, to read that book. But yeah, there's so many out there. That's the thing as well. Like my list of books, right, just from speaking to other people, really is like never ending. But yeah, there's loads of really good newsletters out there that are really entertaining, I think, as well as being like educational, to kind of keep up to date with any trends and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, well, thanks everybody. I'm afraid we have actually now run out of time, and we'll have to finish up. But I just want to thank everyone for participating. So a big thanks to Louise and Luke for giving us some insights into your experience in terms of the job, the market in general, and kind of everything that you've shared today. And I want to thank all of our guests that have actually been here listening to us today. I just want to remind everyone as well, we are doing a big Black Friday sale as well. So please do check out the courses and see if there's anything right for you there. Okay, so thanks once again. And I suppose we'll see each other soon in the future. Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
See you.